And we're recording. Are everybody ready to go? Looks like it.
Recording in progress.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the August 19th Metropolitan Planning Organization Policy Board meeting. To begin with, we're going to just go ahead and let Jessica Mortinger give us some basic instructions.
Good afternoon, Jessica Mortinger, Transportation Planning Manager. I'm here with Ashley Briers, Transportation Planner on remote video, and we will work alongside Courtney Shipley, Chair, to facilitate the meeting proceedings. This meeting is being broadcast and recorded live on the city's YouTube channel and public cable access channel 25. During the meeting, when you are not participating, please mute yourself by clicking on the microphone icon found in the lower left-hand corner of the Zoom menu next to the video icon. When you are muted, a red line will appear over the icon. Muting your microphone during the meeting will make it easier for everyone to hear. You just have to remember to unmute if and when you want to speak. In some cases, we may mute people as needed to minimize distractions during the meeting. Please remember to state your name and title for the benefit of those listening remotely. Every time you speak, you can turn on your video on and off by clicking on the video icon on the menu. For the purposes of this public meeting, please keep your video on when you're participating in the meeting. When you're not participating, it's okay to turn your video off. Just remember to turn your video back on when you're participating. If you're participating by phone, you can click *6 to unmute your phone. For those using Zoom, somewhere on your screen, you will see a choice to toggle between speaker and gallery view. This speaker view lets you show the active speaker. Gallery view tiles all the meeting participants. Individuals who registered in advance to provide public comments will be called upon remotely by name. At this point in time, there's no one who has registered in advance, and there's no one in the commission room to present today. When or if anyone who shows up, they'll be called. They will be called on and allowed to unmute their device and state their name before speaking. We can then call for in-person public comment, although there's no one here. We will follow all social distancing and safety protocols. All motions will need to be stated clearly after a motion is made and seconded. Staff will call in each member individually to provide their vote. Ashley will do those roll call votes. Staff will then need to announce whether the motion carried and the count of the vote. Now I turn the meeting back over to Chair Courtney Shipley.
Woo! Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Now I'm going to go ahead and pass it on to Ashley to do our roll call.
Thank you. I'm Ashley Briers, Transportation Planner. I'm going to say your last name in alphabetical order. If you could say who you're representing, that would be good. Carter?
Metropolitan Planning Commission.
Okay. Finkeldye?
Lawrence City Commission.
Kelly is not here from County Commission, and Reason is not here from Eudora. Shanklin?
Metropolitan Planning Commission.
Shipley?
Vice Mayor Shipley, City of Lawrence.
All right. And Messina?
Kansas DOT.
All right. And let's see, the only other person we have on here today is Jeff Crick from Planning and Development. I'll pass it back over to you.
All right, excellent. Thank you all so much. The next thing on our agenda is public comment. Did we have any? I hear there's no one in the audience. Is there anyone online who has public comment? I'm seeing indications to the negative. So I think we'll just move on to our third item, approving minutes from July 15th. Hopefully everyone has checked those over. Is there any motions to approve those minutes?
Matt Messina, Kansas DOT. Under meeting minutes, section B, public comment, there's a reference to Allison Smith taking notes from Ms. Taylor's comments. And I believe there's a word or two missing on what that action item is from Ms. Smith. So does anyone recall what that was? I didn't watch the video, but I'm guessing it's sent to or discussed with the KDOT project manager.
Yes, Jessica Mortinger, Transportation Planning Manager. It looks like we missed some words, but yes, Mrs. Smith indicated that she would provide those comments to the KDOT project manager for the project.
So then I'll make the motion to approve the meeting minutes with the note that that will be edited, or it's understood that Ms. Smith sent them to the project manager at KDOT.
Mayor Finkeldye, second.
All right, Ashley, would you like to do the roll for that?
Yes, thank you. Ashley Briers, Transportation Planner. Carter?
Yes.
Finkeldye,
Yes.
Shanklin,
Yes.
Shipley,
Yes.
and Messina.
Yes.
Right. Motion passes 5-0.
Thank you again. Thank you, Matt. I appreciate that. Let's move on to our regular agenda items. The first item is to appoint the at-large Lawrence Pedestrian Steering Plan Committee member. Oh, sorry. And that would be Jessica speaking with us, I believe, today about that.
Yeah, Jessica Mortinger, Transportation Planning Manager. We have worked to recruit membership to our committee, and I'm sharing the screen with you right now to show you. Can you all see this list? Okay. And this list is basically the list of appointees that you created established for the steering committee to the pedestrian plan update. You can see a few vacancies. We're still waiting and trying to contact people to establish some representation. The top one, that at-large appointee from the MPO policy board, will be yours for consideration tonight. We have communicated with Chair Courtney Shipley and provided her the 4 applicants that submitted application to the iCompass board page based on the solicitation email that was sent out for consideration of appointees to apply. And I think Courtney, we felt like they were all good candidates who expressed interest in the work that's going to be done by the committee. And Courtney we believe has a name to present today for consideration of appointment to that, for that at-large position.
Yeah, I think that Althea would be a very strong candidate for that. She's done some work with safe routes to school. So I think when we were looking at some of the spaces these other applicants work in, that would be more focused on the movement of children and students around educational areas. So we thought that would be a very good piece and a viewpoint to bring to the board.
Jessica Mortinger, Transportation Planning Manager. I will also point out that we noted that the appointees by committees are pretty male dominated so far. And so it was attractive for us to try to look at balancing that a little more based on gender. And so that was some of our guidance that we provided in our conversation with Vice Mayor Shipley in our effort to try to determine the at-large appointee to bring back to the committee today. So we're looking for, in the sense of that, motion and a second to support the nomination for that position, at-large position of Althea. Remind me of.
Oh, hold on. I'll have to pull it up. I think it might be Shaki. Let me look in my email here. Oh. Unless you
Yes.
get, yeah.
SCHNACKE.
Mayor Finkeldye, as those iCompass appointments, because usually I make the appointments. So for a little while, I thought for a second I was going to make the appointment. So I read the applications and then asked Bobby in the city manager's office, and she reminded me that it was not my appointment, it was this board's appointment. But so I've read the applications, and I agree with the that I guess Althea is how you say her name, would be a great applicant. So I would move to appoint Althea to the commission as recommended by the chair of this committee and Vice Mayor Shipley.
David Carter, Planning Commissioner, I would second that.
Ashley, can you do a roll call for us?
Yes, I am unmuted. Ashley Breyer, Transportation Planner. Carter,
Yes.
Finkeldye,
Yes.
Shanklin,
Yes.
Shipley,
Yes.
and Messina.
Yes.
Thank you. Passes 5-0.
All right, thank you again, everyone. It will be exciting to see what they do when they're finally able to meet and have discussions with staff. Let's move on to the second item, the federal fiscal year 2021 to 24 Transportation Improvement Program. And I believe that'll be Jessica too. I'm sorry, Ashley.
Thank you. Ashley Briers, Transportation Planner. I'm going to share my screen. Okay. Right. Yes. So this is the Transportation Improvement Program, or TIP. And the Transportation Improvement Program, or TIP, is the implementation document for the Long Range Transportation Plan, which is called Transportation 2040 currently. And we update the TIP every 2 years, completely update it. And in the intervening years, we do quarterly amendments. And so this is just amendment number 3. This is a very large amendment compared to our normal ones, but it's just how it happened with timing. One thing I wanted to point out on this sheet that I forgot to do last time we had amendment was there's a column called Transportation 2040 Inclusion. And so it talks about how each one of these projects relate to Transportation 2040 because these projects need to align with Transportation 2040 in order to be able to be in the TIP. So that's just an interesting thing there if you want to look at that. The TIP amendment has several new projects, including a surfacing project on US 24, 6th and Mass traffic signal, and then a couple of American Rescue Plan projects for Lawrence Transit, and then an intersection safety project. And then there's several other revisions through there. And then on the next page, there's a few more revisions, including changing this CARES Act operating funding revision there, and then completely removing the CARES Act capital assistance funding because Lawrence Transit realized they needed to use it all for operating rather than for a portion of it for capital. And then all these projects down here are the transportation alternative projects that were awarded earlier in the year. And this is just adding the KDOT project number to many of them. So all of our jurisdictions have a transportation alternatives project, which is very exciting. One other thing of note is project on this first page had to be included. It was added to the TIP amendment on the first day of the public comment period. So it was added like at 9 or 10 in the morning on the first day of the public comment period. So we feel that it was part of the public comment period for long enough. Hopefully you all agree with that. And we did not receive any public comments. And the technical advisory committee recommended approval at their meeting. Anybody have any questions for me? Stop sharing. Okay.
No questions, anybody? This is a public comment item, which I need to remember every time. So let's check again that someone hasn't arrived in the city hall or that there's no one online that is interested in public comment. I am seeing indications to the negative there as well. Again, is there any discussion from committee members on this?
Mayor Finkel, I'd only say that I can't imagine anyone would object to deploying technology on South Iowa to relieve congestion. So I don't think we're going to get much pushback on that addition. Otherwise, I'm supportive of the TIP amendment, and I can make a motion if there's no other comments. Seeing none, I'd go ahead and move to approve the 2021 to 2024 Transportation Improvement and TIP Amendment number 3.
Would anyone like to second?
Matt Messina, KDOT, second.
All right, Ashley, can you do a roll call for us?
Yes. Ashley Briers, Transportation Planner. Carter.
Yes.
Finkeldye.
Yes.
Shanklin.
Yes.
Shipley.
Yes.
Messina.
Yes.
Thank you. Vote passes 5-0.
Excellent. Thank you again. Our next item here is for the 2021 Unified Planning Work Program, Amendment 1.
Yes, Jessica Mortinger, Transportation Planning Manager. So every year, the MPO Policy Board sets and gets adopted by MPO Policy Board a unified work plan that details the work that the MPO and our planning partners plan to do around transportation planning with our consolidated planning grant funding. Every year, we also, about mid-year, do an update to that work plan to bring it in line with some of the anything that kind of evolves throughout the year, or if we have some significant changes that kind of exceed that 10% threshold or add new work. And so this amendment is doing that for the work that is planned through the end of this calendar year. In a future meeting, you'll see we will bring to you a work plan for 2022, but this is for this year, 2021. And you can see we decreased our total budget expenditures we plan on spending by $13,000. That was a result of moving some of the full and part-time staff rates around based on actual hourly rates that get set after we adopt the previous program. We changed and added our allocations for to bring to actual costs some of the things like our janitorial services. We reduced some of the number of part-time staff hours billed to the grant because one, we didn't think we'd use all of them, and two, we're starting to plan for 2022, and we want to make sure we have enough carryover for some of the work we need to do next year during our long-range plan update. We also changed how we bill staff benefits in our reimbursement documents to KDOT, which required us to change it out of the hourly rate and add it as a fixed expense. So that's just more of a technicality. It costs the same amount of money. Then we made text changes to the document besides the ones to reflect what changed in the budget categories to add an activity around the procurement of a consultant recruitment for a travel demand model update. That will be one of the key technical process that we consult out for our long range plan update. Next year is that travel demand model process. We recognize and add an update to the public participation plan and a MPO federal highway roadway classification map update that is planned that TAC has been discussing. And then we have also added mention of the pursuit of a City of Lawrence mobility planner that will be housed within our transportation planning unit in coordination with the Kansas Department of Transportation. That's going to the Lawrence City Commission in September. And it's also included in the 2022 budget. So we're excited about the opportunity to leverage capacity to do mobility planning with all of our paratransit and human service transportation partners under our current MPO subcommittee, the Regional Transit Advisory Committee. And so we're going to be really excited to add some capacity to do that work. And then we have removed the reference to our work we intended to do around multimodal traffic impact studies because under miscommunication, that's something that the city didn't have planned for this year, and they had already done a minor update to stuff prior. So we had a communication error about that. So we took it out of what we have planned in our work plan. Those are that's the content over the 18-ish pages of our work plan that summarizes the changes that we're asking you to entertain today. I'd be happy to entertain any conversation or questions about any of the work that we have planned or have completed so far in 2021.
I'm not seeing any questions here. Let's make sure there's no one in the audience for public comment on this item. Anyone online? Not seeing anyone out in the public interested in commenting on this. Any other discussion among members? In that case, I'm looking for a motion to approve the 2021 Unified Planning Work Program, Amendment 1.
Mayor Finkeldine, I'd move to approve the 2021 Unified Planning Work Program, Amendment number 1.
Vice Mayor Shipley, I'll second. Ashley, can you do a roll call for us?
Yes. Ashley Briers, Transportation Planner. Carter,
Yes.
Finkeldye,
Yes.
Shanklin,
Yes.
Shipley,
Yes.
Messina.
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0.
Very good. Thanks again, everyone. Lastly, we have some quick updates, which I believe is usually Jessica that can walk us through those.
Yes, Jessica Mortinger, Transportation Planning Manager. I've shared here the quick updates for you. We are still in the process of working on the transit route redesign. The steering committee has most recently viewed the route profiles and will do so at their next meeting also to finalize the summary of the pros and cons of evaluating all the routes. And then the next stage that comes after that is some scenario building around route structures for future considerations. Very exciting. That work is underway and has been, we feel, a very good public process. That committee has given us a lot of diverse perspectives. We have included for your consideration links to some web content and PDF handouts we have created around transportation disadvantaged populations and environmental justice analysis work that we do. I will show you a little bit of what we're looking at here. We tried to break down, this is some of the work you see if you've read the tip, the entire document, not just the summary of projects that Ashley highlighted, is that we're looking at analysis, particularly in that document around environmental justice, which includes low to moderate income households and minority households. We have expanded some of that population in recent analysis we have done in Lawrence. And we are looking at populations that historically have transportation disadvantages. So low to moderate income households, minority households, households with individuals with a mobility disability, people who have less than a high school education, single parent households, households without vehicles, youth under 18, and citizens over 65. We are beginning and working in some of our evaluation processes to assign points to those populations based on the percentage of density within block groups that those populations represent. And as a result, you can see the Lawrence average and how block groups score for what range they fall within. As a result, it gives us a map of the community that looks something like this. The reddish areas followed by yellow, and then green and blue represent transportation disadvantage, with the red being the most intense perceived transportation disadvantage based on these demographic characteristics. We have worked in partnership, particularly with these metrics, to work with the City of Lawrence and the Multimodal Transportation Commission to use this in data-driven decision-making to really advance the work that is happening around equity and talking about the most vulnerable populations in our community. So you'll probably see more of this as we get into the pedestrian planning. But we wanted to make these links and the high-level summaries available to you to look at and available to the public as we start to talk about these, because it is taking some very complex ideas around data and understanding what's happening in our community to do this work. We have had an opportunity to partner with a local agency, a social service agency, and understand their client locations anonymously. And we were able to correlate in a lot of instances with these the areas where we perceive the most transportation disadvantage. And so we are hoping also that can build the local case for us to believe in the data, from us, we know there's some error from the census data, but really to start validating and supporting information around, this agency also collects information about transportation and how their clients get to their agency. And so we were able to use that for people who said they didn't have access to a car. So they either car shared, road transit, walked, or biked. And so we'll hopefully be able to share some of that in the future as we continue to work on that, but we're really excited about the opportunity to use data to drive decision-making around transportation and understanding impacts of the distribution of transportation projects. Back on the quick updates, we have also attached for you the KDOT monthly updates that they have provided, which includes announcements. This is primarily, again, for our technical advisory committee stakeholders, because it has announcements around different projects and funding opportunities. And then we've also given you the most recently approved TAC minutes and their conversation online for you to track kind of what they're talking about. I'd be happy to entertain any questions you might have about any items that are on the quick updates.
Yeah, thanks, Jessica. Matt Messina at KDOT. I'd also like to take this opportunity to plug the local consult opportunities that are upcoming to this group. I'm going to put the link to the information in the chat if that can be used as provided in the meeting minutes following this. But
yes,
don't want to skip that opportunity to share that announcement because I have to admit it's not easy to update the KDOT information as routinely as possible. Lots of new information comes out, every couple of days, to be honest. And this is one big thing that I don't want this group to not be aware of, and I highly encourage you to participate in the upcoming meetings for your respective area, as well as this year this go around, there is a survey that you can take online to provide some input and feedback prior to the events, which is going to extend to August 22nd. So a few more days to provide your early input.
I am sharing on the screen, Jessica Martinger, Transportation Planning Manager, that website that KDOT has about their local consult. We believe local jurisdictions in our region will get involved in this conversation and hopefully attend a meeting. We have actually sent a request to KDOT requesting opportunities to participate virtually in this event, since currently they're planning in-person location events. But that information is here, and we will include it in the minutes.
And Matt Messina, KDOT again. I want to say great work on what you've done for the disadvantaged communities. I do have one question as to how project investment will be evaluated for future investments, since it's likely that the metrics you're using to provide those additional points probably won't change that rapidly over time. So they'll continue to be assigned points for their disadvantage.
So Jessica Mortinger, Transportation Planning Manager. Yeah, I would anticipate there could be some change with the updated 2020 census. Mainly, we anticipate the largest changes in relation to some change in block group boundaries and geographies, there could be some division within those block groups that really lends itself to the shift in some of that demographic makeup, and us to be able to kind of hone in maybe more specifically. For example, we're hoping to use that in the pedestrian plan to understand really if there are, for example, disparities in the quantity of sidewalk linear feet compared to, center line of roadways, to understand if disparities or lack of sidewalk access in particular block groups lends itself to also at higher levels to people who have perceived transportation disadvantage. So that's kind of an example of how we plan to use it. And you're right, it will have to continue to change. We'll have to use the most updated data. And in some cases, we don't anticipate a lot of changes, but we've known there may be historic impacts of like the code requirements in terms of sidewalk required on one side of the street versus two, that are maybe impacting some of those geographic block groups. And so we hope to understand that a little bit more and be able to move forward in the future to tell that story and to understand how decisions around where projects are funded and like things like sidewalk gaps impact our neighborhoods and their access and mobility within the community.
Great. That actually answered a follow-up question too regarding the rearrangement of potential boundaries and zones. So thank you for that.
Any other questions or comments? Is there any public comment on your quick updates that we see?
Courtney,
Yeah.
I'd like to point out, it looks like Gregory Shanklin had raised his hand.
Commissioner
Can you
Shanklin?
hear me?
Yeah.
Yes. I have a couple of quick questions for Jessica. On the transportation disadvantaged population, it looks like you have really good information on where this population resides. What do you do about destinations? I mean, how do you plan transportation systems without understanding destination mapping?
So Jessica Martin, your transportation planning manager. I think origin and destination is a huge point in that. Part of the, let's use the pedestrian plan example I've just been talking about. Is that what you're, okay. So let's use that example as what we've been talking about. Is that okay? And then, so for in that example, if we understand that based on population density of that block group and the center line mile of the roadway, that we're really lacking in the amount of sidewalk infrastructure, I think that gives us the opportunity to dive in and understand how land is divided within those block groups. And if there is not adequate transportation network, particularly in the pedestrian plan, I think the next focus on sidewalk networks that we've kind of identified in the next part, since we've already done in our previous planning work, arterials and collectors and safe routes to school routes, and made priority network gap infill projects identified, particularly in Lawrence, but in the other communities as well around some of those things. So in the Lawrence pedestrian plan, if we get in and look at that, the next step is identifying access to transit, so bus stops, access to healthy food destinations, which we've co-identified through the community health improvement plan with public health. And the third is access to parks, thinking about quality of life and some of the strategic goals in the City of Lawrence strategic plan around safe and welcoming neighborhoods. And so based on some of those conversations that are ongoing since the development of the last plan and the progress we've made, we feel like we would take that block group data and understand maybe where there might be less sidewalk network than some of the roadway miles, and particularly in areas where you have increased population density, as a means to go ahead and try to identify where there might be gaps in the network, or if there's big blocks of neighborhoods that were developed at a time where no sidewalks were required or only one side was required, and start to think about what a primary network would look like to access those types of destinations in our community in terms of identifying additional projects that could be programmed, particularly in Lawrence, into the non-motorized project prioritization list that has a scoring matrix that we worked with Municipal Services and Operations and the Multimodal Transportation Commission to develop. And so that's how we envisioned using that, recognizing those are projections. And within some of those block groups, there will be, some differences where we know in maybe some of the Western block groups that the single family residential doesn't have the same transportation potential as some of the higher density potential. And so I think we'll have to decide kind of with the pedestrian committee in that example, how we feel it's appropriate to use this analysis to help try to make some of those decisions. We haven't done it yet. So I think we're just trying to think logically about it and figure out a way that we can do better than what we're doing now.
Thank you. That's really interesting. And, one of the things that we see fairly frequently on the Planning Commission is a request in one form or another to not build a required sidewalk. And it appears to me, as just one commissioner, that we don't have good real-time information and a means to supply sidewalks over time as they become meaningful and required, in a way that these decisions could be either acted on immediately or implemented in some deferred fashion, so that so we get the sidewalks when we need them, but we don't require them when we don't. So that's, I mean, just one aspect of what you were talking about. I have another quick question with respect to the land use and transportation memo that was part of the TAC meeting minutes. As I read through all of your materials on this monthly basis, I look for ways of speaking to planning and land use that demonstrate an interest and understanding of the view that Lawrence needs to become more densely developed. And so I often wonder, and particularly with respect to the best practices memo that you included, how does Lawrence think about the predictive aspects of transportation planning when we are not currently built out to the degree that we probably need to be?
So Jessica Mortinger, transportation.
I'm sorry, just to tack on to that. And by that I mean when we become more mixed use, when we become higher density in terms of housing, how do you deal with the predictive need for transportation to serve those land uses?
When you say transportation, do you mean transit or do you mean all modes?
I mean all modes. Yes.
Okay. Jessica Mortinger, Transportation Planning Manager. I think our opportunity to do that when we make predictive estimates about what transportation in the future is going to look like is the time in which when we are working on the development of our long range plan. That's the time when we have the opportunity to update our travel demand model. That's the work we added to the scope for this year. And that process takes the opportunity for us to break the whole region into what we call traffic analysis zones. And within those zones, we look at both the population model from Plan 2040 and updates to that in the future to think about within those zones, what do we predict for population? So the conversations about densifying reflect what happens in terms of how that population gets projected within those traffic analysis zones. And then we also project on top of that employment. And the model fabricates origins and destinations based on algorithms that are based on employment values within those same traffic analysis zones. And so retail and non-retail employment have different trip generation rates. So as you increase the use within some of those boundaries, you can imagine that some of those trips could be within those boundaries or within closer boundaries as you get increased density. But you also are looking at, and in that modeling process, you're making some of your best guesses. If we do nothing to the transportation network and load all these trips on based on that increased density, we see what level of service on the roadway network is going to look like. And that's an opportunity for us to talk about with a future transportation plan committee, what type of scenarios we want to show as part of that planning process. So we could choose to have scenarios around population density where we could show what it could look like in terms of needs for transportation if you have, what increased density as opposed to a sprawl scenario where you grow in a different way. And that's one way you can change how you're using predictive needs to understand what levels of service you're going to have in some of your network. If we move to a mode split model, right now our current model only has projections around automobile trips. So one of the things we will explore in this conversation is a mode split model that includes transit. That would allow us to show scenarios around what doubling transit service, for example, would look like in terms of what could happen as a solution based on if there's increased density. And so those are the types of things we'll be scoping into a model consultant project, but also discussing as part of our long-range plan update. Because when we do that long-range plan update every 5 years, that really serves as the opportunity for us to take a refresh, a new picture of what the realities will be for growth in our community and what that means for the next phase of projecting out 20 plus years, the need for transportation investments and projects. Hopefully that answered your question. It's a pretty detailed.
That's a real good description of how you would go about doing it. My concern is now just the when and that it will be done. Because I think that's more of a near-term project than a long-term project. Transportation often leads development, but in this particular case, it lags development. And I think that's something that we need to attend to. But thanks, I appreciate that.
So Jessica Mortinger, Transportation Planning Manager, I would say generally this body will appoint the committee that oversees that plan development update. So thinking about the makeup of that committee to shape that conversation will be a really important factor as we move forward to update that conversation. I think we're in a different place than we were 5 years ago to continue to advance the planning work that we can do around some of these issues to get us further down the road. So I would say that we will absolutely be doing it. It's something that's federally required for us to do. The scope and scale of I'm telling you kind of what staff is planning for now. Of course, a lot of that will be shaped by the committee process and conversations we have within our internal structures with our stakeholder partners, like at the Technical Advisory Committee, to shape and understand the needs that they see throughout the region to do this kind of work.
Thank you.
Sorry, everyone, I was so interested in your conversation, I forgot I was running this meeting. Okay. Thank you, everyone. Is there any other comments or questions that led to perhaps? Not seeing anyone. There's other business. Is that any other business that needs to be brought up or discussed? I'm not seeing any indications here. Our next meeting will be September 16th, unless otherwise indicated between now and then. So unless anyone has any other comments or questions, I think I would entertain a motion to go away. Oh, I guess I don't need one. We don't do that with this crew. Okay. Well, thank you again, everyone. I really appreciate this. Has been very interesting. And good work, staff. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
much.
Bye.
Recording stopped.